The first sign that my Thursday was about to go spectacularly sideways was my best friend Dave, hammering on my patio door like the hounds of hell were licking at his Nikes. He was wild-eyed, gasping, and pointing back towards the canyon that formed the picturesque and usually peaceful border of my property. "Mikey, it's... Oh man, just come see." "Dave, buddy, slow down," I said, coffee cup halfway to my lips. It was 8 a.m. The California sun was just starting to burn off the morning haze. "What's she done now? Brenda, I presume? Did she leave another passive-aggressive note about the precise Pantone shade of my recycling bin?" Brenda Jenkins, our HOA president, was a woman whose soul had clearly been replaced by a binder full of restrictive covenants and a bottomless well of righteous indignation. "Worse, Mikey, so much worse! The fire trail, the one Henderson always kept clear, behind your place, up the ridge?" My blood ran cold. "Not the fire trail. Please, not the damn fire trail. We're talking peak fire season here. The air already thick with the scent of dry chaparral and distant anxiety. That narrow strip of cleared earth wasn't just some informal path. It was our first line of defense, the place firefighters could make a stand if the canyon decided to impersonate a blast furnace. Old man Henderson, who lived here before me, used to say, "Son, this ain't just about keeping the weeds down. This is about sleeping sound at night when the Santa Anas blow." He knew. Brenda clearly did not. We scrambled to the back of my property, and there it was. Or rather, there it wasn't. The 10-foot-wide, life-saving dirt trail, gone, vanished. In its place was a scene of such breathtakingly stupid suburban hubris that I actually felt my jaw drop. Neatly laid, blindingly white decorative gravel, and dotted along it, like tiny, flammable tombstones, were those feathery, drought-resistant, ornamental grasses that basically act as kindling with a designer label. And there she was, Brenda, clipboard in hand, a smug little smile playing on her lips as she directed a bewildered-looking gardener who was meticulously arranging a rock. A decorative rock. On what used to be our fire break. "Brenda!" My voice came out sharper than I intended, but a tranquilizer gun wouldn't have made me sound calm right then. What in the ever-loving, inferno-inviting hell is this? She turned, her smile tightening into that familiar look of a cat who's just successfully pushed a priceless Ming vase off a shelf. "Good morning, Michael. Lovely day for a bit of community improvement, don't you think?" "Improvement?" Dave spluttered beside me. "Brenda, that was the fire trail." "Precisely," she said, tapping her clipboard with a perfectly manicured nail. "An unsightly dirt path, constantly overgrown with what some residents allowed to become a fire hazard." She gave me a pointed look. "This," she gestured grandly to the gravel and fluff, "is an aesthetically pleasing HOA-compliant solution. Part of our new enhanced landscaping directives. Much safer. The gravel provides a natural barrier. I swear I could hear my brain cells committing suicide. A natural barrier? Brenda, it's gravel. And those tumbleweed wannabes you've planted? We're in a red flag warning. The news is practically screaming apocalypse by wildfire every hour." The gardener, a young guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, muttered, "Man, I just do what she says. She said clear it and pretty it up. Said the old path was an eyesore." "An eyesore?" I took a step closer, trying to keep my voice from escalating into a roar that would scare the local coyotes. "That eyesore is on the county fire map as a defensible space. My insurance company literally gives me a discount because of it. It's what separates us from that canyon turning into a freaking Roman candle aimed at our houses." Brenda puffed up. "Michael, I will not be subjected to your theatrics. I consulted a pamphlet on fire-resistant landscaping. This design is perfectly adequate. Besides, the fire department can access properties from the street if necessary. This little messy track was entirely redundant. "A pamphlet," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. She consulted a pamphlet. To Brenda, I said, "Redundant? Are you actually certifiably out of your mind?" "That is quite enough," she snapped. "This is an official HOA action. It is complete. And frankly, Michael, it looks significantly better. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other compliance issues to address." She turned on her heel, a vision in beige fury, and marched off, leaving us standing there, staring at the scene of the crime. Dave just looked at me. "A pamphlet, Mikey. She doomed us with a pamphlet." My mind was already racing. This wasn't just about HOA stupidity anymore. This was about safety, my home, Dave's home, dozens of homes. And with the winds already starting to whisper through the dry brush, we didn't have the luxury of bureaucratic wrangling. Brenda had just lit a match, metaphorically speaking. I was going to have to put it out, with something a little more dramatic than a strongly worded letter. "She's not going to get away with this, Dave," I said, a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach. "This isn't just a landscaping dispute, this is war." First, I tried the so-called official channels. An emergency Zoom call with the HOA board was, predictably, a masterclass in futility. Brenda, naturally, dominated. "Michael is being typically hysterical, board members," she announced, her face filling most of my laptop screen. The beautification project behind his property line is a resounding success. The area is perfectly safe. As I've mentioned, I consulted an excellent pamphlet on fire-resistant landscaping techniques. "A pamphlet?" I repeated, trying to channel a zen-like calm I absolutely did not feel. "Brenda, with all due respect, a pamphlet is not a certified fire marshal. That trail was a designated fire break. We have documentation. The fire department uses it for planning." A nervous-looking guy named Arthur, who I think was the board's treasurer, mumbled, "Well, Brenda is the president, Michael, and she did show us the pamphlet. It had some very nice pictures." I wanted to scream. "Pictures? Are we going to show pictures to a wildfire? My insurance company, the one that actually assesses real-world risk, specifically mentioned that trail as a key factor for our relatively sane premiums in a high-risk zone." Brenda sniffed. "Then your insurance company is clearly misinformed and probably in collusion with your alarmist rhetoric. This project enhances property values. Next agenda item." And just like that, I was muted. Useless. Worse than useless. Okay, plan B. I called the local fire department, hoping for some official muscle. I got Captain Rodriguez on the line. Nice guy, sounded genuinely concerned. "Look, Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice sympathetic but weary. "I hear you. And frankly, what she did sounds incredibly reckless, especially right now. But our hands are kind of tied with private property and HOA disputes unless there's an imminent blaze actively threatening structures. We can't legally compel her to undo it on our say-so alone." "But it's a fire break," I insisted. "Surely that means something." "It means a lot to us, believe me. And it's going to make our job harder if something kicks off in that canyon. Best I can do is schedule a community liaison officer to come out and talk to her. Try to educate her. But that's likely a few days out, maybe next week. And honestly, these HOAs, they're like little fortresses. They rarely listen to us unless they absolutely have to. A few days, next week. The Santa Anas were forecast to pick up tomorrow." I thanked him and hung up, a fresh wave of frustration washing over me. I tried city planning. More forms, more jargon, more promises of looking into it. Everyone I spoke to agreed privately that what Brenda had done was monumentally stupid, but no one had the authority or the inclination to act with the urgency the situation demanded. I was pacing my garage, which, I'll admit, is probably better equipped than your average suburban two-car. Dave was there, trying to offer solutions while simultaneously looking like he needed a stiff drink. "So what?" he said, slumping onto a stool. "We just wait for a spark? Maybe we could get a bunch of guys with shovels and a pickaxe and just manually unpretty it over the weekend?" "A weekend?" I scoffed, gesturing wildly at the weather app on my phone. It was a sea of red warnings. "Dave, look at this. Elevated fire danger. Critical conditions. Gusty winds probable. A weekend might be too late. And you know, Brenda, the second we touch one of her precious, flammable grass tufts, she'll have the cops here citing us for trespassing, vandalism, and probably disturbing the peace of her prize-winning begonias." "So what then, Rambo? You gonna sneak out there in the dead of night with a flamethrower and call it proactive brush management?" "Tempting," I admitted. "Very tempting. But an excavator is too slow, too obvious. She'd see it coming a mile off, probably try to form a human chain with her garden club cronies. We need something bigger, faster. Something she can't argue with, something that says, 'This is happening and your pamphlet means nothing.'" I stopped pacing. My eyes fell on a framed photo on my workbench. It was me, grinning like an idiot, standing next to the massive, almost prehistoric snout of an Ericsson S-64 Skycrane helicopter. It was from let's just call it a previous engagement, involving a remote construction project and a very tight deadline. A slow, evil grin started to spread across my face. Dave followed my gaze. His eyes widened. Mikey? What's that look?" "That's your I'm about to do something incredibly expensive and probably requires a waiver for a collateral damage look." "Not collateral damage, Dave," I said, the plan blossoming in my mind like a beautiful, terrifying flower. "Precision application. How quickly do you think we can get a Skycrane out here?" Dave just stared. A Skycrane? Like the ones that carry water tanks the size of my Prius? Those giant orange things?" "The very same," I confirmed, already reaching for my phone. "Or, in this instance, a highly effective, incredibly precise, and very, very fast landscaping tool when you attach the right accessories. Brenda wants an enhanced landscape directive? Oh, I'll give her enhanced." The first call was to Gus. Gus is an experience. Old-school helicopter pilot owns a niche air service that specializes in the kind of heavy-lift jobs no one else wants or can do. He's seen it all, done most of it, and has a healthy suspicion of anyone who wears a suit or uses the word synergy. "Gus? Mikey Thompson." A gravelly grunt from the other end. "Thompson, been a while. What'd you drop in a ravine this time?" "Nothing so dramatic, Gus. Listen, I've got a bit of a landscaping emergency." Silence. Then, a dry chuckle. "Landscaping? You're calling me with Bertha for landscaping. Thompson, are you day drinking again?" Bertha was his prize Skycrane, a formidable beast of a machine. "No, seriously, Gus. It's a critical situation. How fast can you get Bertha airborne and over to Valencia Hills? And I mean fast." "Valencia Hills? That's practically your backyard. What's the payload? And don't tell me it's a prize-winning rosebush." "Cash, of course, Gus. Generous cash. Think surgical strike, but with 10 tons of rotor wash and a very specific ground-clearing objective. The target is overzealous ornamental grass and some poorly advised gravel." Another pause. I could almost hear him scratching his grizzled chin. "You're serious, aren't you? This ain't some kind of prank where I end up airlifting your neighbor's yappy poodle to Catalina Island?" "Cross my heart. This is a public safety issue, Gus. Imminent threat due to a compromised fire defense. You know the drill for emergency ops." "I know the drill for your kind of emergency ops, Thompson. Usually involves a lot of explaining later. You got the permits? The LZ clear?" The FAA not going to have my license for breakfast? Permits are being expedited with extreme prejudice, I said, choosing my words carefully. LZ will be my backyard. It's big enough. Just, my associate is handling the FAA liaison as we speak, emphasizing the emergency fire prevention angle. It's all by the book. A very, very rapidly written book. Gus sighed, a sound like sandpaper on concrete. You're gonna owe me big for this, Thompson, real big. And I want hazard pay if that HOA lady you're inevitably tangling with starts throwing rocks at my bird. Bertha's sensitive. Deal. Absolutely. How soon can you be here? Fueling her up now. Gotta run through pre-flights. Give me 3 hours to get there. Maybe another hour for setup on your end once I arrive. You got your ground crew ready for the, landscaping tools? They'll be here, I promised, though I hadn't actually called them yet. Thanks, Gus. You're a lifesaver. Literally. Yeah, just have the coffee ready. And make it strong. Next call, Chad and Brad's Extreme Green Landscaping. They were local, had heavy-duty gear, and an appetite for unusual jobs if the price was right. Chad, Mikey Thompson, got an emergency brush clearing job for you. Top priority, top dollar. Mikey! Hey, man! Chad's voice was cheerful. What you got? That patch of ivy finally declare independence? Something like that. Look, I need about 200 yards of, let's call it, aggressive vegetation abatement. 10 feet wide, down to the bare dirt. And I need it done in the next, say, 4 hours from now. A whistle from Chad's end. 4 hours? Mikey, we're booked solid for 3 weeks. A job that size, that's a full day with a big crew and our industrial chipper, maybe even 2 if the access is tricky. Brad muttered something in the background about overtime and heat stroke. Right, about the access and the heavy lifting, I said, trying to sound casual. That's being handled. From above. Silence. Then Brad's voice, closer to the phone now. From above? What, you got a team of specially trained eagles with tiny little chainsaws? Close, I said. Think bigger, much bigger. I just need your crew on the ground for the fine-tuning, the immediate follow-up once the main clearing is done, and frankly to look official and professional while the aerial assets are deployed. I'll pay triple your standard emergency rate, plus a bonus for discretion and rapid response. Another pause. I could hear them whispering. Triple? Chad finally said, his voice laced with disbelief and dawning curiosity. And the heavy lifting is aerial. You're not pulling my leg, are you, Mikey? This isn't another one of your elaborate pranks? Deadly serious, Chad. Be here at my place, 1 p.m. sharp, equipment ready, trust me on this one. You are not going to want to miss this spectacle, and bring safety glasses. Lots of them. Okay, Mikey. Okay, triple rate, aerial assistance. We'll be there. But if this involves alien abduction, I'm charging quintuple. Fair enough, I chuckled. Things were falling into place. Expensive, insane, possibly lawsuit-generating place, but place nonetheless. Now for the tricky part. The inevitable confrontation with authority before Gus even got off the ground. As I was manhandling my expensive patio umbrella and a surprisingly heavy terracotta planter out of what was about to become an active helicopter landing zone, 2 sleek black and white cruisers from the Valencia Hills PD pulled up to the curb. Officers Miller and Ramirez. Miller looked seasoned, Ramirez younger, with an air of someone who'd seen a lot of weird HOA disputes, but was still faintly optimistic about humanity. And, of course, on her porch across the street, phone already pressed to her ear, was Brenda Jenkins, looking like a Roman emperor who'd just spotted a particularly unsatisfactory gladiator. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she trilled, her voice carrying across the quiet street with the piercing quality of a banshee's lament. This man, Michael Thompson, he's threatening me. He's planning to destroy HOA property with some kind of illegal aircraft. He's unhinged. Officer Miller ambled up my driveway, his hand resting casually on his belt. Ramirez flanked him, eyes scanning my increasingly chaotic backyard. "Afternoon, sir," Miller said, his tone level. "Michael Thompson, we received a call about a potential disturbance. Something about unauthorized aircraft and threats to landscaping?" I wiped a bead of sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand. "Officers, welcome to the party. Mikey Thompson, yes. Look, this is probably going to look a bit unorthodox, but Mrs. Jenkins there, in her infinite wisdom and armed with a dangerous pamphlet, has destroyed a critical community firebreak. We are in the middle of a red flag warning. I am taking emergency measures to restore it before this whole canyon goes up like a tinderbox." "Emergency measures?" Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "And these measures involve aircraft, you said?" "That's correct, officer, a helicopter. A rather large one, to be precise. It's for specialized rapid vegetation removal." Brenda, who had apparently decided her porch wasn't close enough to the drama, had crossed the street and was now hovering at the edge of my lawn, radiating disapproval. "He's lying, officers. He's a menace. He's probably going to dump toxic waste or install a giant antenna to spy on our private communications. He's building a helipad without a permit." I sighed. "Brenda, for the last time, it's not a helipad. It's my backyard. And the only thing being dumped is your ill-advised gravel back into the quarry it came from. Metaphorically." Officer Miller looked from Brenda to me, to the clear blue sky, then back to Brenda. "Ma'am, with all due respect, he hasn't actually done anything with an aircraft yet, and threatening landscaping isn't high on our list of actionable offenses." He turned back to me. "Sir, a helicopter, especially a large one, in a residential zone like this, that requires a whole raft of permits, FAA clearance, flight plan notifications, insurance waivers." "Working on it, officer," I said smoothly, trying to project an aura of calm competence I was miles from feeling. "My associate, a gentleman with considerable experience in aerial logistics for emergency situations, is handling all the necessary FAA liaison and flight approvals as we speak. It's all being done under public safety protocols, imminent danger due to compromised fire defense infrastructure. It's all perfectly by the book. A very, very fast-tracked book. I may have subtly flashed a laminated card from my wallet, an old volunteer emergency responder ID, but it looked vaguely official if you didn't squint too hard. We're just trying to prevent a catastrophe here. Officers, keep everyone safe." Ramirez was definitely fighting a smile now. "A rather large helicopter, you said, for rapid vegetation removal." "Right." Miller, however, remained stoic. "Well, Mr. Thompson, as long as you're not breaking any actual city ordinances or state laws at this precise moment, and this associate of yours is indeed squared away with the Federal Aviation Administration, we'll just be keeping an eye on things, from a safe distance if a rather large helicopter is involved." He gave Brenda a firm look. "And Mrs. Jenkins, please allow Mr. Thompson to handle his landscaping. We'll be right here if any actual laws are broken." They retreated to their cruisers, parking them a little further down the street, clearly settling in for the show. Brenda was sputtering, phone clapped to her ear again, no doubt escalating her complaints to a higher, and hopefully equally ineffective, power. I glanced at my watch. Gus was due in under an hour. Chad and Brad, the landscapers, would be here any minute. The stage was set. All I needed now was my star performer. The first sign of Bertha's arrival was a low, guttural thwump, thwump, thwump that seemed to vibrate up from the very earth itself. It started as a faint pulse, easily mistaken for a distant truck, but it grew steadily, insistently, until the windows in my house began to hum in sympathy. Neighbors, drawn by the escalating commotion and Brenda's increasingly shrill pronouncements from my curb, started to drift out of their houses, phones already up, recording. Dave, who'd been anxiously chain-drinking iced tea on my porch, shot to his feet. "Holy. Mikey, is that her?" And then she crested the ridgeline. Erickson S64, Skycrane. Bertha, in all her orange industrial glory. She was, to put it mildly, magnificent. A monstrous, skeletal dragonfly of a machine built for one purpose: to lift impossible things and put them down in improbable places, or, in today's case, to obliterate bad landscaping choices with extreme prejudice. She circled once, a slow imperial survey of her new domain, then began a careful, ponderous descent towards my backyard. The rotor wash hit first, a hurricane-force gale that flattened Brenda's prize-winning petunias instantly, sending a cloud of pink petals swirling down the street. Decorative gravel pinged off nearby fences. Brenda shrieked something about horticultural vandalism, but her words were swallowed by the growing roar. Just then, Chad and Brad's truck rumbled to a stop behind the police cruisers. They hopped out, took one look at the Skycrane maneuvering over my roofline, and their jaws collectively hit the pavement. "You!" Chad stammered, eyes wide as dinner plates. "You were not kidding, Mikey." Brad just pointed, speechless. Gus's voice, surprisingly calm amidst the mechanical symphony, crackled over the handheld radio I was clutching. "Thompson, you sure about this, LZ? It's tighter than my ex-wife's wallet in here. That oak tree on your east side is looking awfully personal." "You got this, Gus," I yelled back into the radio, though he probably couldn't hear me over his own engines. "Plenty of room? She's a beauty. Just thread the needle." I gave him a series of elaborate hand signals we'd worked out years ago, feeling like a particularly stressed-out air traffic controller. The cops were out of their cars now, standing by the hoods, sunglasses on, looking for all the world like they were at an air show. Which, in a way, they were. The Mikey Thompson Invitational HOA Dispute Resolution Air Show. Brenda was having a full-blown Stage 5 meltdown on the sidewalk, phone still glued to her ear, no doubt providing a live, hysterical commentary to whatever unfortunate soul was on the other end. "This is illegal. I'm calling the mayor, the governor, the president of helicopters. He's destroying the neighborhood." The Skycrane stabilized, hovering about 30 feet above my, now very windswept, lawn. Suspended beneath its massive belly, instead of the usual water tank or cargo hook, was a wicked-looking contraption. A heavy-duty, custom-fabricated brush-cutting and mulching head, about 12 feet wide, studded with teeth that looked like they could chew through concrete. This was Bertha's landscaping tool. "Okay, Gus," I shouted into the radio. "Target acquired. That glorified cat litter and those flammable feather dusters masquerading as plants. Let's give them the enhanced landscape directive they'll never forget. Operation Skydrop is a go." And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where the 4 minutes later part of the story title really kicks in. It wasn't 4 minutes from when Brenda first desecrated the trail. Oh no, it was 4 minutes from the moment Gus engaged that terrifying mulching head and Bertha went to work. The noise was apocalyptic. The ground shook. The air filled with a whirlwind of shredded ornamental grass, pulverized gravel, and a fine mist of righteous fury. Gus, with the skill of a seasoned surgeon wielding a 10-ton scalpel, guided the mulching head along the exact path of the old firebreak. It didn't just clear the trail, it obliterated Brenda's folly, chewing through the gravel, the weed barrier fabric beneath it, and the offensive grasses, spitting it all out as a fine, biodegradable mulch that was probably quite good for the soil. I was on the ground, a little further back now, using hand signals to guide Gus, though he barely needed them. It was a maelstrom. Dirt and debris, mostly small stuff, thankfully, rained down, but the main force of the expulsion was directed away from the houses, towards the already denuded slope. Chad and Brad, after a moment of stunned paralysis, actually grabbed their rakes and started to look vaguely useful, staying well clear of the main action, but making a show of tidying the edges as if this was all part of a normal day's work. Bless their opportunistic hearts. Brenda was still screaming, but the rotor wash was so intense now it was literally blowing her words back into her face, along with a healthy dose of dust and shredded petunia. She tried filming with her phone, but her hair kept whipping across the lens, and she looked like she was being attacked by a very angry wig. Officer Ramirez had his phone out too, but he was grinning. Officer Miller was just shaking his head, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. It was chaos. It was beautiful. It was the most over-the-top, gloriously satisfying act of retaliatory landscaping the world had ever seen. And then as quickly as it began, it was over. Precisely 4 minutes after the mulcher had engaged, Gus lifted the spinning head. He hovered for a moment, allowing the dust to begin to settle. Where once there had been Brenda's monument to bad taste, there was now a perfect 10-foot wide, down-to-the-bare-earth firebreak. A pristine scar of safety on the landscape. Gus's voice came over the radio, as dry as the desert wind. "Landscaping complete, Thompson. That'll be one lightly used firebreak delivered fresh. And you can tell Petunia Killer down there that my bird is exceptionally eco-friendly. She runs on pure, unadulterated spite for bad landscaping and HOA overreach." With a final, almost regal dip of its nose, Bertha, the Skycrane, began to ascend. She circled my property once, a sort of mechanical victory lap, then turned and thwumped her way back over the ridge, disappearing as dramatically as she had arrived. The silence that descended was almost more shocking than the noise. It was broken only by the distant sound of Bertha's retreating rotors and Brenda Jenkins, who sounded like she was trying to inhale her own tongue. Everyone, Dave, the assembled neighbors craning their necks from their driveways, Chad and Brad leaning on their now entirely superfluous rakes. Even Officers Miller and Ramirez just stared. They stared at the raw, clean gash of earth that snaked along the property line, exactly where the old firebreak had been. It was perfect. Aggressively, undeniably, helicopterically perfect. I took a deep breath, the scent of freshly turned earth and aviation fuel filling my lungs. It was the smell of victory. I walked to the edge of my property, where Brenda's gravel nightmare had once stood. I looked at the beautifully brutal trail. Then I turned and looked directly at Brenda. She was pale, her lipstick smudged, a single defiant blade of ornamental grass clinging to her otherwise immaculate hair. I just smiled, a wide, beatific, don't mess with Mikey smile. "Looks much better, don't you think, Brenda?" I called out, my voice calm in the sudden quiet. "More defensible, and so much more aesthetically aligned with, not having our houses burned to the ground." Brenda's jaw worked for a moment before any sound came out. When it did, it was a strangled squawk. You barbarian! You vandal! You'll be hearing from my lawyer, the HOA lawyer, the city, the FAA, the International Society for the Protection of Decorative Gravel and Abused Petunias. Officer Miller, bless his weary, seen-it-all soul, strolled over, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Well, Mrs. Jenkins," he said, his voice studiously neutral, "the trail certainly appears to be cleared now. And Mr. Thompson here seems to have some rather persuasive friends in high and rather noisy places." He glanced at the pristine firebreak. "Unless you can show us a specific city ordinance or state law he's violated right now that doesn't involve hurt feelings over landscaping choices or unauthorized aerial beautification." Officer Ramirez, who had finally holstered his phone, muttered to Miller, just loud enough for me and a few lucky neighbors to hear. Gotta admit, that was impressive. Never seen an HOA dispute resolved with direct air support before. Beats a strongly worded letter any day. Brenda, realizing she was getting no sympathy from the law, let out a frustrated shriek that could curdle milk, spun on her heel, and stormed back to her house, phone already clapped to her ear again, presumably dialing every lawyer, politician, and influential garden club president in the state. I had a feeling her phone bill was going to be almost as impressive as Gus's invoice. Dave walked over, eyes still slightly glazed. He clapped me on the shoulder, a bit harder than necessary. "Dude," he said, his voice full of awe, "you are certifiably 100% grade A insane, and my absolute hero. I'm buying you beers for a month, maybe 2. Chad and Brad, who had recovered enough to look slightly sheepish about their previous skepticism, actually got to work. They raked the edges of the new firebreak smooth, cleared away some of the larger bits of debris Bertha had dislodged, and generally made themselves useful. True to my word, I paid them their triple rate, plus a hefty witnessing an act of God and/or extreme suburban warfare bonus. They left looking dazed, but significantly wealthier. The neighbors were a mixed bag. Some stared in open-mouthed horror, clearly siding with Brenda's vision of a gravel-strewn, flammable utopia. Others, particularly those who'd been around long enough to remember the last big fire scare, gave me discreet thumbs-ups. Old Mrs. Henderson, who lived 2 doors down and was a contemporary of the original Mr. Henderson, actually hobbled over with a plate of still warm chocolate chip cookies. "My late George would have loved that young man," she said, patting my arm. "He always said sometimes you gotta fight fire with, well, something equally impressive." Gus's invoice arrived via encrypted email the next morning. Let's just say Bertha doesn't fly cheap, especially on an emergency landscaping call-out. But every time I replayed the image of Brenda's face as that first wave of rotor wash hit her prize-winning petunias, I figured it was worth every single penny. The HOA online forum, I was later told by a gleeful Dave, had apparently melted down. The threads were a glorious mix of outrage, admiration, and wild speculation about my connections to clandestine government agencies. A few days later, a very official-looking, cream-colored envelope arrived by courier. It was from Jenkins, Throckmorton, and Blight, LLP, the HOA's notoriously aggressive law firm. It was filled with impressive-sounding legal jargon. Cease and desist, unauthorized alteration of common area, willful destruction of HOA-approved landscaping, operation of heavy machinery without permits, and my personal favorite, infliction of severe emotional distress upon decorative gravel and ornamental flora. I poured myself a stiff drink and called my own lawyer, Carol. Carol is sharp, expensive, and possesses a gloriously cynical sense of humor, which is why I keep her on retainer. I read her the highlights. She was silent for a moment, then I heard a distinct snort, followed by what sounded suspiciously like a muffled guffaw. "Michael," she finally said, her voice laced with amusement. "Let me get this straight. They are threatening to sue you for, and I quote, unilaterally restoring a vital community safety feature that their esteemed president recklessly and negligently destroyed during a period of officially declared high fire risk, utilizing methods that, while admittedly dramatic, were arguably the fastest and most effective way to mitigate said imminent risk before it could result in catastrophic property damage and potential loss of life." "That's the gist of it, Carol," I said. "Oh, and for traumatizing the gravel. Don't forget the gravel." "Right," she chuckled. "The gravel. Michael, this letter is 90% hot air, 9% billable hours, and maybe 1% actual legal standing, which I intend to crush like a bug. Given the documented fire risk, Brenda's clearly unilateral and ill-advised action, and your, let's call it, profoundly proactive solution, I think we can make this go away with a very strongly worded reply. Something along the lines of reckless endangerment by HOA, failure to maintain essential safety infrastructure, and community safety prevailing over transient aesthetic whims and pamphlet-based horticulture. Music to my ears, Carol. What about the FAA complaint Brenda inevitably filed? Dismissed this morning, Carol said smugly. Your pilot friend, a Mr. Augustus McTavish, apparently has an impeccable, if colorful, record for emergency agricultural operations and specialized vegetation management in high-risk terrain. Apparently, aggressive weed abatement via aerial mulching falls under that umbrella. Who knew? Gus is a national treasure, I said with genuine affection. So, no fines? No jail time for assault with a deadly rotorcraft or conspiracy to commit aggressive landscaping? Not this time, Michael, she laughed. Just perhaps try to keep the aerial heavy lift solutions to a minimum in future. My malpractice insurance underwriter is developing a nervous twitch just hearing your name. I make no promises, Carol, but I appreciate it. So, life in Valencia Hills has returned to a new kind of normal. The fire break, now unofficially known among some of the more rebellious residents as Mikey's Mile or the Bertha Cut, is still there. It's wider now, clearer than it's ever been. Some of the neighbors have even started using it for evening walks, enjoying the unobstructed canyon views. It's funny how quickly something becomes an accepted part of the landscape when it's not actively trying to kill you with its flammability. Brenda Jenkins still glares at me whenever we cross paths. Her petunias, I'm told, are staging a slow, traumatized recovery. But she doesn't say much. The HOA meetings, according to Dave, who now attends purely for the entertainment value, are significantly quieter and involve far fewer unilateral declarations based on pamphlet research. There's even talk of a new bylaw requiring actual expert consultation before any beautification that involves, critical safety infrastructure. Imagine that. I was out on my patio the other evening, beer in hand, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls in shades of orange and purple. The air was calm, the only sound the distant chirp of crickets. The new trail lay like a protective arm around the edge of our properties. Dave wandered over, a six-pack under his arm. He handed me a cold one. You know, he said, settling into a chair, they're still talking about it down at the hardware store. You're a local legend, Mikey. The guy who fought the HOA with a Skycrane? I grinned. Catchy. You think Brenda learned anything from all this? Dave snorted. Brenda? Nah. She's probably researching loophole-ridden ways to install concrete sound barriers around your property. But I'll tell you what, I bet no one in this entire county is messing with a designated fire break again. Ever. So, what's next on your agenda? Building a giant moat to deal with door-to-door salesmen? Tempting, I said, taking a long pull of my beer. Very tempting. But for now, I think I'll stick to terrestrial threats. Mostly. I looked out at the darkening canyon, the peace of the evening settling around us. But Dave? I added, a mischievous glint in my eye. Never say never. You never know when a situation might call for a little aerial persuasion. And, as the first stars pricked the velvet sky, I raised my beer in a silent toast. To common sense, to good neighbors, and to the undeniable fact that sometimes the only way to deal with a Karen armed with a clipboard and a bad idea is with something a whole lot bigger, a whole lot louder, and a whole lot more Bertha.